What is up, everybody? Welcome to the first movie review here on my channel, Show Me Movies. My name is Josh Fan, and today I'm going to be reviewing an interesting movie that I found on Amazon Prime. One day when I was bored, I was scanning Amazon Prime through different kind of horror movies and that sort of thing, and I came across this slow play suspense drama movie about a love affair. And this movie was called The Neighbor, and The Neighbor stars William Fitchner as a man named Mike. And Mike is a guy that is in a routine marriage at home. He's presumably retired. When you watch the movie, he doesn't really work or anything, while his wife still does. And Mike is just kind of at home, living a normal life. Seems like he's a little bit burnt out on the way things are, especially with his wife. And things get a little bit worse when a young couple moves in next door. The young couple's names are Jenna and Scott. Jenna played by Jessica McNamee and Scott played by Michael Rosenbaum. And as soon as they move in, Mike starts to become enthralled with them and just very interested. He starts off by inviting them over to a barbecue with some other fellow neighbors to try and make them feel welcome. And at this barbecue, Mike first starts talking to Jenna, the attractive wife of Scott, the new neighbors that moved in next door. And he starts to really take interest in her. And, Mike has this odd relationship with his wife as Jenna has with her husband. And I'll get into that a little bit later. But this leads the two throughout the movie to get closer to each other. And as the movie goes on, things kind of start to pop up. Scenarios where Mike finds himself approaching Jenna because Jenna doesn't really work either. She kind of stays at home while her husband Scott is a car dealer. So he's out working a lot, I guess. And Jenna's kind of at home. And she does a lot of stuff kind of in the backyard. And that's where this kind of sets up conversation between Jenna and Mike, because Mike will kind of be keeping an eye on her, whether it's from his window inside his home or while he's in his backyard, because he also likes to garden. And they talk about this at the barbecue. Jenna really wants to garden as well. And, Mike sees her out gardening or swimming in the pool, whatever it may be. And they start to spark some conversation. You can tell they're kind of interested in each other. And the biggest reason that these two are brought together is because they're both kind of stuck in relationships that aren't really going all that well at the moment. So there's Mike with his wife. And as I said, it seems like Mike is a little bit burnt out. The romanticism just isn't there with his wife. His wife is named Lisa, and she is played by Jean Louisa Kelly. And she does a fairly good job playing sort of this distressed wife who feels like her husband is slipping away a little bit. She does come off as a little bit controlling throughout the movie. Like, there's even at the very beginning when the new neighbors come over and Mike decides to invite him to the barbecue. She gets all bitchy and she's like, "Oh, well, I wish you would have told me about this barbecue and stuff." Just really kind of controlling of Mike, and really just kind of pushes him away throughout the movie, which leads to this affair with the neighbor Jenna. And then also there's this other character in the movie. It's the son. His name is Alex, played by Colin Woodle. And I'm not really too sure why his character is there in this movie. I guess it's just kind of a throw-in character, a filler character. But really the movie could have been the exact same if he wasn't in there. He kind of comes home at one point. I guess he's in college. He comes home and starts to hang out with the new neighbors, blah, blah, blah. Nothing really ever comes of it, though. Kind of weird. And that kind of brought the movie down just a tad bit for me, just having a pointless character in there. But as I said, Mike starts to become more and more interested with Jenna, and Jenna has something that's kind of pushing her away from her current husband. It is said during the movie that Jenna and her husband are newly married, but clearly they're already having marriage problems, as Mike will head over there and he'll hear fights going on. He'll hear a lot of screaming. There's a part where he looks out his window and they're just having a shouting match, and Scott throws a chair into the pool, or he kicks it into the pool. And there was another part in the movie where Mike can hear somebody hitting someone. He can hear the sound of someone being hit, and he suspects that there's some abuse going on. Mike brings this up to his wife, and his wife, is like, "Oh my God, why won't you call the police?" and all this other stuff. And Mike is like, "I don't really want to do that." And the wife is just like, "Okay, either call the police or stay out of it because you're not getting involved in this. You don't come between them." Well, of course, Mike gets in between them, and because of Jenna kind of having trouble with the husband Scott, she's drawn to Mike, and it definitely seems like throughout the movie that Jenna is attracted to Mike, just kind of like that, strong husband figure that she doesn't really have with Scott. Jenna seems to feel protected with Mike. She seems to feel comfortable with Mike. And there's at one point where they're chit chatting over gardening or something like that. And Jenna invites Mike into his home. Jenna's talking to Mike, talking about how she's thinking of having a kid with Scott and how she's not so sure about it. She's not sure if Scott is the right guy. And Mike is like, well, if you're not sure, don't have a kid with him, all this stuff. And all of a sudden, this leads to a kiss between Mike and Jenna. And mind you, there's like, I don't know, a 20, 30-year age gap between Mike and Jenna. So this is a really interesting affair. But I was kind of disappointed because this was the only time throughout the movie where there's like any sort of affection, physical touch at all between Mike and Jenna. It seems like they just threw this in there to establish the fact that they like each other, and then that was it. That's all you really get throughout the movie, the hint that they like each other and that there's maybe a potential affair brewing here. Because the rest of this movie is where I have a problem. So Mike's wife eventually gets sick of him just, being obsessed with the neighbor and all this other stuff. It's kind of unclear why exactly she kicks Mike out of the house, but it can be inferred that it's kind of what's going on with this neighbor. Mike gets kicked out. It seems like he's heading towards a split with his wife. And then Mike goes to talk to Jenna, and Jenna's talking about how she thinks she's gonna leave Scott. And he's thinking, okay, I can get Jenna to move in with me. We can start the life that we want and all this stuff. He never outright says that, but you can tell that's what he's thinking. And he does attempt to invite Jenna to come live with him. And she's like, oh, I'm not so sure that's a great idea. And then Mike comes back to his wife's home one day to pick up the rest of his stuff or whatever. And then he sees Jenna again, talks to her, and turns out she's pregnant with Scott's kid now and has decided that everything is fine now and they're going to counseling. And so now you have Mike, who is distraught because he is now being kicked out of his wife's home. And he seemed to be rather okay with it because it seems like in his head, he envisioned this being the perfect excuse to end up with Jenna. And now Jenna decides things are okay with Scott. And so now Mike is left with nothing. There is no affair anymore, nothing like that. And Mike seems to, take on one last attempt towards the end of this movie to win Jenna over and break up this toxic relationship going on between Jenna and Scott when he comes home one day and they're fighting again. And Mike gets in a physical altercation with Scott to the point where Jenna is trying to break them up. And then Mike hits Scott with a golf club. And then Jenna calls the cops and tells Mike to get the hell out of his house. And it's like, well, hold on. He just stopped your abusive husband. Like, what is going on here? And I saw a lot of people when I read other reviews about this movie complain about that ending. And I understand why. The ending just feels you wanting so much more because after this, Mike goes to his backyard where all of his plants are because Mike loves to garden. You see that a lot throughout the movie. And he goes and admires his plants one more time before he's, I guess, taken to jail. They never actually show it, but it's kind of implied that he gets arrested and goes to jail or whatever, which is kind of mad to me. I don't really like that they implied that because it could easily just be explained as self-defense in regards to Mike and him hitting Scott with the golf club. But, whatever. I understand why people were complaining about this ending, though. It just felt it just made you, it left you with so many questions and like, oh my God, so Mike really is going to end up with nothing and he's going to go to jail. And like, what was the point of all of this? And while the ending is very like frustrating, you're like, oh my God, this can't be how it ends. I feel like that's what these producers were going for. And, I think it was actually a good movie. I understand the effect that they were going for. It makes you feel like, oh my God, we have to get a sequel to this. When's the next movie going to be? But that's what the movie is. It is a slow playing suspense drama kind of love affair that ends up really badly for one of the people involved. And it is important. It's an important lesson for people watching the movie to not do what Mike did. Because Mike did something very dangerous, participated in something very dangerous, and he got into business even though his wife told him to stop, that it's not his place. Mike kept being persistent, tried to get involved, and he got absolutely scorched. You just stay out of people's business and try not to start an affair with the young neighbor lady. Like that's really the lesson from this movie. Overall, though, like I enjoyed the movie, but I also felt kind of unsatisfied by the ending a little bit. But I understand that this is what this production crew was going for. That's what the director was going for in this movie. And I can appreciate that a little bit. This movie was all right, though. I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10 rating. I recommend you watching it if you're just absolutely bored and there's nothing to do, and you're also skimming Amazon Prime for some movie to throw on for an hour and a half. The third act of this movie goes by really quick, and you'll pause the movie maybe to go do something, make some more popcorn, go to the bathroom, whatever, and you'll come back. And the third act just flies by. It's a very quick hour and a half movie. There's just really no other way to explain it. I do have one other comment though on William Fitchner, who is a great actor. I do feel like sometimes his movements, the way he talked, was a little too awkward for this role. The type of demographic that he is, though, which is an older kind of middle-aged man, maybe upper middle-aged man, he's perfect for the role in that sense. But I do feel like he was a little bit awkward at times, and you could just kind of find yourself cringing throughout the movie where he was trying to relate to this young lady next door named Jenna, and it's like he just I don't know, there's just something about William Fitchner, the way he moved, the way he did things in this movie that just kind of left me cringing a little bit. Even though he is a great actor, I'm not sure this movie suited him all that well. But I was still entertained by this movie. I really had nothing to do, was just skimming Amazon Prime, and it got me into looking for some other affair movies, sort of that same plot. But yeah, guys, this was a solid movie. I understand why people were upset with the ending. The acting is all right for the most part, and despite not being that great of production value, it was entertaining, and it's an hour and a half. So that's my thoughts on The Neighbor. This movie, I recommend you go watch it if you're really bored. But I wouldn't like go out of my way to try and watch this movie or anything like that. If you're just like me though, and you're skimming Amazon Prime looking for something to watch on a Friday night or whatever, maybe with some friends, this movie's good for that. So yeah, that's all I got for this one, guys. But I want to hear from you in the comments. What are your thoughts on this movie? What would you give it on a scale from 1 to 10? I want to hear from you guys. But that's my review. So with all that being said, make sure you like, share, and subscribe so more people can find this. And I will see you all in the next one. Y'all take care.